Hi, this is Dr. Celeste Barnett, Assistant Principal at San Diego Academy, and I am here today with,
Ann Nebelon, one of our counselors.
and we are coming back to share with you what we hope will be a tool that you can use to talk to your student about a kind of difficult topic. We're going to be talking today about types of abuse and what are some things, if people will join us for the next 15 minutes, what kind of takeaways might they have?
Well, I put this together because I want to give some basic but accurate information about abuse, what it is, but also what you can do about it if you suspect something like this is happening, or your teen comes to you and says, something's happening with my friend.
Mhm.
This will give you a tool to refer back to, and you can look up the resources. But mostly, like Dr. Barnett was saying, that it's really about creating an educational tool for you to use in a discussion with your teen.
So
And
a parent could watch this with their teen also, and
oh,
as a discussion
yes,
point.
that would be ideal.
Okay.
Um, and hopefully then it creates a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it doesn't, they know you care about this topic,
Mm-hmm.
and I would hope, know that they can come to you, because that would be the emphasis. If you're ever worried about anything, you can come to me. I'll help you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So some of the other topics, just so we can remember, because you're very good about taking on the difficult topics. These are things you see in your office. I mean, they are happening at
Yes.
SDA and in Encinitas, and avoiding the topic doesn't make it go away. We
Correct.
have to
Yeah.
talk about these things. So
Yes.
we've talked about suicide. What are some of the other topics that
um,
anxiety?
Dating, violence,
Mm-hmm.
healthy
Mm-hmm.
relationships,
Mm-hmm.
vaping, drug, alcohol use.
Right.
There's all kinds of tough topics,
Mm-hmm.
but because we see them here in high school, I think it needs to be part of a
Yeah,
conversation.
we have an
So,
obligation to share with parents how they can navigate this. And you've said over and
yes.
over, and we're both parents too. You know, I'm nervous about not doing it right. Like, am I going to cause
Mm,
more harm if I don't know exactly what I'm talking about? And you've always made
yeah.
me feel better that you don't have to have all the answers. Be a safe place for this child to go to, and then let them know they're not alone. You'll figure it out together.
Exactly. Yeah. And so part of these topics that we're addressing, there's this parent piece that we're
Mm-hmm.
making for you,
Mm-hmm.
and there's going to be a student educational piece,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a staff educational piece.
Mm-hmm.
So our whole school community will have access to, or at least a general understanding that there's a place to go seek out this information if they need to address the topic.
Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. So, why is this important for us to talk about?
Well, take a look here at
Mm,
the statistics, because it's pretty shocking. It's the percentage of children in San Diego County
wow.
who have been abused. So this is our county,
Mm-hmm.
our community. And I think we want to pay attention to it, because we can't think it's not happening here just
Yeah.
because we live in a pretty community,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids all come to this fabulous school. It happens everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
These statistics are, obviously, they don't add up to 100%, because a lot of times they go together. So
Right.
there'll be multiple allegations. And, like emotional verbal abuse may go along with physical abuse, or neglect would go along with emotional, they can combine anyway. Um,
So, this is saying that of reported instances of abuse, this is the breakdown amongst the types. So,
yes,
of the reports, 45% are neglect, 34% emotional or verbal, etc.,
correct.
and some overlap or commingle.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah. So, okay, next I'll share a little bit about what those mean. So
Okay.
we are going to address neglect, physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, and human trafficking.
Okay.
Child abuse crosses all socioeconomic and educational levels, religions, ethnic, and cultural groups.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bottom line is, it can affect anyone in any community,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Neglect is the number one type of abuse, and neglect is really the failure to provide adequate food, clothing, shelter, medical care, or supervision, and there's no physical injury connected to it. It's just a matter of neglect. And that is the number one type of abuse, which is shocking too. So it's something to pay attention to.
Okay.
Physical just means any non-accidental act that results in physical injury. So it can be severe punishment, unjustifiable punishment, when a person reacts out of frustration or anger and strikes, shakes, or throws a child. It can also be intentional and deliberate, such as burning, biting, cutting, poking, twisting limbs, or otherwise it's like a form of torture. Emotional and verbal, that's harder to define sometimes because it's based on words and there's usually no actual evidence except like what someone is reporting and sometimes it's they say this is happening, the other person says it's not. But emotional and verbal abuse can fall under these categories of belittling, putting them down, screaming at a person, threats, blaming, sarcasm, name calling. Name calling I hear a lot. A lot of put downs like lazy,
You're worthless.
stupid, worthless. That kind of stuff is probably the most common that we see for teens. And then any unpredictable responses like a continual negative mood, constant family discord or unrest, chronically communicating conflicting messages to where the teen isn't sure. They don't know what to do or how to do it because they hear one thing from one parent and one thing from another. So keeping a home calm and quiet and to some degree and safe is super important. And then sexual abuse is, of course, any kind of mistreatment, violation, exploitation that involves a teen in sexual activity to provide gratification or financial benefit to the perpetrator. It includes contact for sexual purposes like molestation, statutory rape, prostitution, pornography, exposure, and incest. And the shocking thing to me is 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused by the age of 18.
Wow.
And that, I look out my window, my office window sometimes at lunch, and I see like hundreds of kids out there, or I walk around campus, or I walk in a classroom, and I can't help but think they're sitting right here. They're right here, and we don't know. We only know if they let us know. So we do want to make it safe for kids to share things that have happened to them or are happening to them so that we can get them some help. Another shocking statistic is 34% of people who sexually abuse a child are family members.
Wow.
And you might think, no, not my family. But what if it's somebody outside of your immediate family and still a family member?
Right.
That is very common in sexual abuse. So pay attention.
And I'm glad you're touching on this because on human trafficking, I know you're going to talk about the prevalence is a lot higher than most people think. But it's kind of, I mean, to me, it's kind of new. I don't understand it exactly, what it is, what it isn't, what to look out for. So I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah, and I think it's a hotter topic now because of social media and all the time people spend on their technology. So it's bringing more attention to it, and it's creating a new avenue of access.
Right, making it easier for people to recruit
yes
children into human trafficking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's what it is. It's the recruitment of people by threat or use of force or coercion. It's usually coercion to abduct or deceive. And in response, they give some kind like gifts or will feed that person's vulnerabilities. Like for instance, a girl goes on social media, but she doesn't have a lot of self-esteem, and she's very emotionally and sensitive, and emotionally vulnerable and sensitive, and she thinks she's not pretty, and she's just having a hard time. But some supposedly cute guy comes on and says, "Oh, you're beautiful. I'd love to meet you. I'll be your boyfriend." And of course she's going to fall for it. Of course she is, because she's vulnerable.
Mhm.
That's how this works. And it's the vast majority of how teens are contacted and recruited is through social media.
Okay. So they may be getting what the perpetrator may be promising might be attention, it might be drugs, it
Mhm.
might be
Gifts.
money, gifts.
Yes.
Okay.
All any of the above. And that's why I kind of think this is probably the most important part of this discussion, because we do want to warn our kids. And it isn't just girls, it's boys too.
Mhm.
Um, but particularly kids that are a little more emotionally vulnerable. So if that's your teen, I'd be sitting down and going over this part with them.
And we're going to talk in a minute about what
Yes.
the warning signs are and how to protect
Yes.
yourself. Talk a little bit more about how frequent it is in San Diego.
Okay.
I'm blown away by this.
I was shocked. So when I look up statistics, I look from very reliable sources. I could not believe it was 8,800 to 11,000 people in San Diego County a year. I couldn't believe that. So I kept searching as I kept digging around. Some of the numbers were even a little higher, but this was probably I felt the most accurate source.
Mhm.
I never saw anything smaller than that number.
Hmm.
And then add to that, the average age
Mhm.
is 16.
Wow.
But I've seen a 13-year-old and a 14-year-old. So that's an average age.
So in your office, you have talked to two kids who have been trafficked.
Yes.
You're in Encinitas at SDA.
Yes.
Wow.
And I'm only one counselor.
Yeah.
So the most important line on this slide is initial contact is often through social media.
Mhm.
So you want to keep a line of communication open with your kids, so that if they do meet somebody online and they're, oh, I met the greatest guy, he's so cute,
Mhm.
pay attention,
Mhm.
invite him over, see if he comes over.
Mhm.
If he doesn't come over, no,
Mhm.
then it's a no,
Mhm.
because they're probably not a cute 16-year-old
Right.
boy.
Right.
Yeah. So some of the signs to watch for, this is when it's happening. You want to look for signs of physical abuse. So unusual burn marks, bruises, cuts, unexplained absences from class. They
Mhm.
ditch out the second half of the day, and
Mhm.
where are they?
Mhm.
You see them starting to dress differently, maybe a little more provocatively.
Right.
Sexualized behavior, super exhausted,
Mhm.
becoming withdrawn, depressed, distracted, checked out, any of those things, especially if that's new.
Mhm.
And then maybe brags about making or having lots of money. They might not say that to you, but you might think like, well, how did they afford that?
Mhm.
That's a big red flag. And then if they're running away or they go missing, like through a nighttime period or something like that, it could mean they're being recruited.
So is human trafficking synonymous with recruiting into prostitution, or is that a form of human trafficking?
It's part of it.
Okay.
It's definitely part of it, because that's what human trafficking is
Mhm.
using people usually for sexual
Okay.
things to make money.
Mhm. Okay. All right. And how can we help our children not get involved?
Yeah.
Prevent it.
So, and this is another great talking point slide with your teen, is you want to encourage them and this is always, this is just for anything, is to be vigilant of your surroundings. Don't, avoid walking alone. Don't walk out, especially at night,
Mhm.
alone. If they're suspicious of something or scared, to trust their instincts
Right.
and respond as being afraid.
Mhm.
Don't think, oh, I'm just being stupid.
Mhm.
No, react,
Mhm.
because a lot of times our instincts are pretty real.
Mhm.
Don't trust easily. Use social media wisely. Those kind of go together. So the cute 16-year-old boy that wants to be your boyfriend, well, let's meet in person. Come over to my house
Mhm.
with my mom and dad home,
Mhm.
and let's see if it happens. To be ready for anything. It's about walking around out in the world, living your life, and being aware
Mhm.
of what's going on. Be ready to use that phone. Teach them to call 911. If
Mhm.
they're out alone and they're creeped out by some guy lurking, call 911 and
Right.
say, I'm a 16-year-old girl and there's this guy lurking.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to become top priority, and the police will come and help.
Yeah.
So overall, the effects of abuse of any kind
Right.
could show up in some of these ways. It can show up in many ways. It can also show up in grades are starting to decline. Mm-hmm. They're just unhappy. You're seeing a real change in behaviors, and especially if they're emotional difficulties, like you see more anger, mm-hmm. anxiety, sadness, low self-esteem. They stop caring for themselves as much. Hygiene goes down. Mm-hmm. All those kinds of things. Also, mental health problems may show up, like depression, mm-hmm. eating disorders, mm-hmm. post-traumatic stress disorder, self-harming, suicidal thoughts could be the results of abuse. Mm-hmm. Not that it always is, mm-hmm. especially things like depression. Sometimes you inherit depression, mm-hmm. and depression is the reason why they're having a hard time.
Yeah.
But it's always, of course, something to pay attention to. And then if they're having problems with drugs or alcohol, increased use, more of a, like disregarding any of your house rules, more disrespectful attitude, those kinds of things. Difficulty with relationships, meaning even yours, yours and theirs. If that's getting worse, it's something to pay attention to.
Well, this makes me think, I've heard you say before that not misbehavior, but troublesome behavior is always communicating something.
Yes.
So if a child something is happening to them that's causing them distress, they're going to try to self-soothe or self-medicate or protect themselves in some way. And a lot of these are intended to be protective mechanisms. So
correct.
That's how they manifest as these types of things, but it's them trying to protect themselves from something that is either really happening or they perceive is causing them danger.
Yeah.
Right?
They could be seen as like coping strategies. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we have to remember that these are kids and they don't always know how to communicate what's been happening. And if it's abuse, the abuser may have been saying, if you tell anybody, right. I'll hurt your right. family, or I won't like you anymore, or, it can get really detailed as to how they groom and pull people in. And so the teen could just think like, I can't tell anybody. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to teach our kids like, yes, you can. You can always tell. If there's something that you're struggling with, we want you to tell, because they shouldn't have those kinds of secrets.
Yeah. Okay. So as a parent, here's the part that I need the most, being scared about talking about these difficult things. How should I react?
Always, always, always stay calm, which is, you got to really teach yourself to do that, because when it's our children, you're going to want to freak out and then be like, what? I can't believe, no, that can't be happening, is what's going to be going on in your head. You need to just keep that inside, stay really calm. By doing that, it's going to let them know you are listening, and then you are not going to judge. You have to make sure you don't say something like, well, why are you out so late that night? No, it's not about that. It's about, that's a whole different issue.
Right.
This is about keeping all the children safe and protected. And ideally, we want them to come to you. You as a parent should be their person, but they're not going to come to you if you don't stay calm, open to listening, non-judgmental. That's the key right there. The other thing that's super important is no matter what they tell you, you always believe them. Every time a student tells me some shocking thing, 100%, I believe them. And I say, I believe you, and I'm here to help you. Because even if they're lying, which so rarely ever happens, that's a problem too.
Right.
But if they're not lying, they're not making this up, you need to react appropriately.
So what I hear from parents sometimes is my child just attention seeking?
Yes. Yeah.
Do I feed into this? And what you're saying is,
yes, give them attention.
Okay.
If they're attention seeking and they're telling you something super serious, give them attention. But what I say is then you give them the right attention.
Ah,
You will go and figure out what are the next steps. What do I need to do? Do I need to react immediately and call 911? Do I have a few minutes? Can I call Child Protective Services?
or a
Can I call a
hotline,
hotline?
right?
Can I call my school counselor?
Mm-hmm.
Can I call my child's therapist?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many ways to seek help. So stay calm, always believe them, and let them know, even though you may not know exactly what to do, you can say, wow, okay, I'm here for you. We are going to figure this out together, but I'm not sure what the next steps are. So I'm going to call a hotline, or I'm going to call your therapist, or I'm going to call, whoever,
Right.
and get some more information. I'm going to do it right now.
Okay.
You don't ever want to say, oh, I'm going to do it, and then 5 days later.
Right.
No.
Right.
It needs to be immediate, because then they're going to know, oh, you're on it.
Mm-hmm.
You care. You heard them. You believe them, and you get that this is a really serious situation.
So what I hear you saying, and I've heard you say this when we've been talking about other topics too, is I as a parent do not have to have all the answers. What I need to communicate to my student, my child, is I'm here with you. You're not alone. We'll figure it out together, and then seek out some of the resources that we're going to talk about.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So.
Okay. Child Protective Services, CPS, gets 7.5 million reports per year. That's in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And it is sometimes difficult when you call CPS to get through.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure you just sit there and you wait until you get through, because it's that important. And then a report of child abuse is made every 10 seconds in the United States. So if you think this isn't happening, it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be really scary to report, but that's what it will take to make it stop.
Mm-hmm.
So even if your child is saying, no, you can't tell anybody, absolutely, you have to report it. And I have kids all the time begging me not to call home or begging me not to seek out help. And it doesn't matter. They're a child. They need our help. They need our support. And I just do it really calmly. And I always explain what I'm going to do and what most likely will happen. So they're not so scared. If you're struggling with a situation, like if you personally or someone in your family, get help immediately, because abuse never solves a problem. And there is help out there for everybody. We want everybody to live happy, productive lives.
So let me ask you a question, because I can imagine someone who might now, after watching this, wonder whether they are in some way emotionally abusing someone, or if they are neglecting someone. And it might feel super scary to call the police or call Child Protective Services because you're worried the child's going to be taken away, or you might be arrested. Where else can you call?
Definitely you can call one of the hotlines and remain anonymous.
Okay.
You can call Child Protective Services and remain anonymous too. I've called before and just asked a question.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't anonymous, but just wasn't sure. Like, is this reportable? Are you guys the right avenue to go down? And they will help. So you can stay anonymous calling Child Protective Services and any of the hotlines. So I would strongly suggest that, so you can seek out and get more help and support.
Right.
So if it's something that you or another family member is doing, seeking help, appropriate help and support, will go a long, long way in keeping your family together.
Yes.
Everybody creating a safe environment, a happier environment, and that's what it's all about. So getting help for your teen. If this is happening to your teen, you want to get them help immediately, and that means talking to a health professional, a therapist, psychologist, counselor, social worker, family doctor. If you or your teen are worried about a friend, you need to report it immediately to law enforcement, Child Protective Services, or call the hotline. And never think like, oh, I can't do that because you don't think anything will happen. You can't do that. You have to always err on the side of doing the right thing to protect the teen and make sure that they're safe. And you never know. Sometimes reporting abuse is going to make it stop. And then hopefully gets that child some support and they can start healing.
Right.
It's very healing for a teen to finally get this information out and know that they have adults on their side.
Right.
That right there.
I've seen over and over and over how much relief students have when the secret is out.
Yes.
And they can share it with somebody who they
Yes.
know, like I said, is in it with them to help get support.
And we still love them and care about them and support them, even though they tell us something horrible, scary, and you know and that we're still there. We didn't go anywhere. Says a lot.
Yeah.
So remember, you can stop abuse. We're here to help. If you have questions, you can call and ask us too. And as scary as it might seem to discover that your teen or someone you know is involved in abuse, you still have to speak up and seek help so that the healing can begin.
So where can we go for help?
Here you go.
Yeah.
Our Encinitas Sheriff Station is so responsive, so helpful. We deal with them a lot here at school, and so we've met many of them. They're calm, they listen, they do whatever they can to help us keep our kids safe. Child Protective Services, there's the 2 numbers. There's a National Child Abuse Hotline you can call 24 hours a day. A National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you feel like you're worried about something like that, give them a call or text them, or you can click on that website as a live link and it goes to their website and explains a little bit more too.
And what about calling 911? When is it okay to call 911? A lot of people are really nervous about using that number.
Yeah, and I don't know why, because they are there to help and support. You call 911 and you report something as scary as abuse or human trafficking, any of those kinds of things, they're going to react immediately because we're talking about children, and they're there to help protect children. You will go to the top of the list, and we tell our kids that too, that if something's happening, you got to call 911, especially if it's happening on something comes up on a weekend. Right. And they can't come in and talk to their counselor here at school, or maybe they work with a therapist, but the therapist isn't available. If you're ever worried that anybody is in any kind of imminent danger, or you fear they might be, call 911. They can go and do welfare checks. Right. Nobody goes and gets arrested. They go and say, hey, we got a call and we want to make sure everything's okay. Because they are major child protectors. Yeah. And I've never seen them not respond in a really positive way.
So what I'm hearing you say is if you feel like there's an imminent threat, obviously call 911. If you're unsure about what to do, what I'm hearing is call the hotline. They're experts at this, about helping you navigate what to say, where to get help, what to do next. Yeah. All the things we've just covered that we may not remember in the heat of a moment when all the emotion is charged. Call the hotline.
And you could call the Encinitas Sheriff's non-emergency number and just say, hey, I'm really worried about my daughter's friend, my neighbor. I'm not sure what's going on, but my son or daughter said they think it's abuse or whatever. You can just share that.
They saw this on social media, and it seems like that kid is crying out for help. But I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Err on the side of caution.
Yes. And then they will probably send somebody. They will send somebody out to do a welfare check and make sure that child is safe. So the resources are there. So,
and now that we've been through this, what are the takeaways you most want people to walk away with?
I think the biggest one really is that now you have a tool that gives you some basic information to have a conversation with your own child. Or hopefully even it gave you more information as a parent if a situation like this might ever come up. So that's the goal, is providing information and education for everybody in our school community. And that there's always help out there. And then the other big takeaway is no matter what your teen comes to you to talk about, stay calm, listen, don't judge,
Yeah.
and always believe them.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.